Level 1, the candidate. Almost everyone who attempts selection fails, and most of them fail completely alone out here, with nobody watching. There's no team here to carry you through it. No one left to lean on, and no one left to blame. Just you, a soaked map, and a mountain that genuinely doesn't care either way whether you make it. The Brecon Beacons never announce themselves. They simply wait, patient and indifferent, for you to arrive. Rain turns solid ground into something between mud and standing water, mile after unforgiving mile. You're on your own out there, no help, just checkpoint after checkpoint in the freezing cold. Nobody tells you the actual time standards. You only find out, painfully, too late to do anything about it. The fan dance comes early in the process, and it breaks people almost immediately, without warning. Straight up penny fan, straight back down again, full weight strapped to your back the entire way. Somewhere near the summit, your legs simply stop feeling like legs at all anymore. You keep moving anyway, because stopping means something far worse than pain. Endurance comes later, longer, colder, deeper into your own private exhaustion. Some candidates just don't show up at the next checkpoint at all. Nobody goes looking right away. That silence says everything it needs to. You start realizing this was never really about fitness in the first place. It's about whether you keep walking when your body screams no. The instructors barely speak to you. That silence is deliberate, not neglect. You're being judged constantly on things you'll never see written down anywhere. Combat survival waits at the very end. Nobody warns you what that means. You finish, if you finish, changed in ways that take months to name. The weeks of selection accumulate into something you don't fully process until it's over. A specific total exhaustion that resets your understanding of what your body can actually endure when nobody is coming to carry your rucksack for you. You navigate alone across terrain that punishes every wrong decision with hours of wasted daylight and worsening weather, and the specific psychological weight of that isolation, no team, no radio check-ins, no encouragement, becomes heavier than the rucksack itself by the third day. There's a specific moment on a ridgeline, disoriented, soaked through, genuinely uncertain whether you're still on the correct bearing, where the actual test reveals itself fully. Not whether you can navigate competently, which you already can, but whether you can make a confident decision anyway and keep moving without the kind of paralysis that would be fatal in an actual operational environment where nobody is coming to tell you the right answer either. You commit to a bearing. You're wrong, slightly, and you correct it without panic. And you make the checkpoint within the window, and nobody applauds, because applause was never part of what this regiment offers anyone. The interviews after selection are stranger than the physical courses themselves, board after board of quiet questions with no obviously correct answer, watching not what you say, but how you carry uncertainty while saying it. There's a specific quality being screened for that has almost nothing to do with anything measured on the hill. A capacity to operate with total self-reliance and total psychological stability in situations where the usual structure of clear orders simply doesn't exist. Level 2. The Trooper. You arrive at your Sabre squadron with a beret that experienced operators regard, correctly, as unearned in the way that actually matters, because selection proved you could endure. Not that you're ready to be trusted with this regiment's actual standards. You are given the least glamorous tasks without complaint. Understanding that this is the same continuation of the same filtering logic, applied now to whether you can execute unglamorous work with the precision this regiment expects from everyone regardless of rank. The experienced operators around you speak in a specific shorthand, built from operations you'll never be briefed on in full, and the specific humility required to sit in that gap, absorbing without yet contributing, echoes the same discipline you learned surviving selection, except here the entire premise is that you already proved you could do exactly this before you ever arrived. You train relentlessly in skills entirely different from conventional infantry work, close quarters battle, specific tradecraft around operating in small teams with minimal support, a curriculum built around self-reliance rather than mass and firepower. There's a training exercise where your execution falls short of an unstated standard nobody explicitly told you existed, and the correction you receive is immediate and entirely without ego protection, because the actual stakes here assume you'll internalize small corrections quickly, or you won't last long enough for them to matter. You absorb this without defensiveness, understanding the bluntness itself as a form of respect. Trust builds through 100 small demonstrations of reliability, and you notice, gradually, that operators who've been here for years are including you in conversations that months earlier happened entirely without you. Level 3. The team member. Your first real deployment carries a specific texture no amount of training fully replicates, because the autonomy granted to small patrols here exceeds almost anything in conventional military doctrine, and the first time you feel the actual weight of that autonomy. No higher headquarters micromanaging your patrol's moment-to-moment decisions changes something permanent in how you approach every operation afterward. You execute missions where the actual decision-making authority sits with your four-man patrol in real time. A level of trust that initially feels almost disorienting after years of more hierarchical structures. There's an operation where intelligence proves incomplete in exactly the way it eventually always does, forcing your patrol to adapt in real time with a specific latitude to deviate from the original plan that would require higher approval at almost any conventional unit. The composure required to make that call, trusting your patrol's collective judgment rather than waiting for permission that isn't coming, reveals exactly how much the regiment's entire operational philosophy depends on trusting operators at your level with authority conventional structures reserve for officers several ranks senior. The mission concludes, and the debrief afterward has a specific quality of unsentimental precision, extracting every lesson without interest in credit or blame. You start carrying a weight between deployments that doesn't fully leave, an awareness of consequence that recalibrates how ordinary civilian life feels, and you understand, watching operators around you, that the ones who last entire careers here are rarely the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who've built specific, sustainable relationships to carrying it. Level 4. The Patrol Commander. Tactical authority over a four-man patrol changes your relationship to every operation entirely. Because you're no longer just executing your own piece of a mission, you're responsible for the real-time decisions of the entire patrol in the specific moments when plans meet reality. You develop a specific situational awareness that operates almost below conscious thought, reading a developing situation and adjusting your patrol's posture in fractional seconds. A skill built entirely from repetition under conditions where hesitation carries a cost. No training exercise can fully simulate. You start mentoring newer troopers directly, watching them carry the same disoriented uncertainty you once carried, and the specific patience required to develop their judgment rather than simply asserting your own experience becomes its own discipline. One you recognize now that senior operators once extended to you without your fully appreciating it. There's an operation where your read on a rapidly developing situation diverges from the original plan in a way that proves correct only in hindsight, and the specific weight of having made that call teaches you something about the actual stakes of this position that no amount of prior deployment fully prepared you for. You understand at this rank that the mentorship responsibility extends beyond tactical execution into the quiet transmission of judgment itself, the kind that can't be taught directly, but that gets absorbed by newer operators watching how you carry yourself under the specific pressure only this rank generates. Level 5, the Squadron Sergeant Major. Years accumulate, and your authority now rests on something entirely different from tactical execution alone, an accumulated institutional knowledge and a specific kind of respect that newer operators extend, not because rank requires it, but because they recognize in you a level of judgment they're actively trying to build in themselves. You become the actual bridge between the squadron's officers and its operators, translating command intent into execution in a way that respects both mission requirements and the lived operational reality of the men actually carrying it out. There's a conflict between operational priorities and operator welfare that only becomes visible at this level. Competing pressures that officers focused on mission requirements sometimes miss, and that operators focused on their own patrols can't fully see either. And the specific diplomatic capacity required to balance these draws on a level of judgment no earlier rank fully demanded. You develop a specific eye for which newer operators are building sustainable careers here, and which ones are heading toward the kind of burnout that ends careers in this regiment permanently. The specific isolation of this rank surprises you in ways the more dangerous ranks never quite produced. a growing awareness that most operators around you have known you only as an authority figure, never as the exhausted candidate you once were on a Brecon Beacons ridgeline years earlier. Level 6, the Squadron Commander. Authority over an entire Sabre squadron moves you substantially away from direct tactical execution and into a position shaping training standards and the actual development of every patrol commander beneath you. You develop a specific eye for evaluating candidates during selection, drawing on your own memory of standing exactly where they are now, a judgment trained not just to identify physical capability, but the specific psychological self-reliance the regiment actually requires. There's an institutional decision about training standards or operational doctrine that risks drifting from what actual operational reality demands, and the specific weight of pushing back against pressure from command levels above you. Using the full authority of your position teaches you something about the loneliness of this level of responsibility that patrol-level command never demanded. You sit in rooms now with conventional military leadership whose priorities don't always align cleanly with the operational realities you've spent an entire career learning intimately. And you develop a specific advocacy capacity, translating classified operational necessity into language that satisfies oversight without compromising the security the regiment depends on. You shape training curricula and selection standards that will determine what an operator in this squadron looks like for a generation of patrols who will never personally know your name. Level 7, the Regimental Sergeant Major. The top enlisted rank across the entire regiment carries a weight unlike anything the earlier ranks demanded, because you now shape training standards and institutional culture for every operator who will serve in this regiment for years after your own tenure ends. You sit in rooms now with officers and occasionally civilian oversight whose priorities don't always align cleanly with the operational realities you've spent an entire career learning intimately, and you develop a specific advocacy capacity, translating operational necessity into language institutional leadership can actually act on. There's a decision about selection standards or training doctrine that carries consequences extending far beyond any single squadron, and the specific weight of making that call, knowing it will shape the regiment's actual capability for a generation, teaches you something about this rank's isolation that no amount of prior command experience fully prepared you for. You shape the entire selection pipeline that determines who earns the beret you once earned yourself. Standards built from decades of accumulated judgment, now encoded into institutional practice. Somewhere on the Brecon Beacons tonight, a candidate is alone in the rain, disoriented, uncertain whether he's on the correct bearing, absorbing a version of the same isolating test you once absorbed, not knowing your name, never likely to know it, but shaped nonetheless by standards you spent the final years of your career quietly building. The regiment continues whether you're here to lead it or not, because that is the actual nature of this legacy, a standard that outlasts any single Regimental Sergeant Major's tenure, that has already outlasted operators more decorated than you will ever become. All of it deliberately unrecorded, deliberately unremembered by the public. This work was always meant to protect. So here is the question underneath everything this video just walked you through. Which rank are you standing in right now? Because the Regimental Sergeant Major shaping this entire regiment's future today did not start there. He started alone on a ridgeline in the rain, uncertain, exhausted, with nobody watching and nobody grading him in real time. And he closed that distance one bearing, one deployment, one earned rank at a time.